Hello friends, I wish to share with you an exciting update, one that is a step in the right direction towards the progression and accountability that we wish to see. The RRHA put out a letter today saying that it will be ceasing evictions through the remainder of 2019. Now, while we are excited and we are thankful for all of the advocates who have been fighting and to see this victory for the rest of 2019, we are not just calling to delay the violence. We are calling to stop the violence and still to have accountability around why the units in Creighton were not being leased during the height of the evictions, as the FOIA document requested. So we still are calling for accountability and an explanation on why it seems like a process of de facto demolition was taking place. That being said, wanted to provide that update, and now to the statement and the original update that we received, but just want to make sure you all had the correct context. So see you on November 12th at 4:30 to ask for not just to delay the violence, but to stop the violence and to make sure the RRHA is fully complying with the law concerning leasing the units in Creighton Court. Thank you. Greetings, friends, fellow revolutionaries, and freedom fighters. I'm Alan Charles Chipman, faith-rooted organizer and transformation strategist at Initiatives of Change USA. I am coming before you today to update you with some alarming information we received from a vital community advocate concerning the increasing eviction rates done by the RRHA recently. We, the Initiatives of Change USA staff, recently received information from a community advocate who obtained documents via the Freedom of Information Act, also known as FOIA, that verified their suspicion that Richmond Redevelopment Housing Authority and its president and CEO, Damon Duncan, has been steadily increasing the amount of evictions since June. More troubling, the FOIA request revealed that the RRHA has stopped leasing vacant units in Creighton Court since June, without the proper approval from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, also known as HUD. This very much resembles patterns of de facto demolition, where in preparation for redevelopment, typically following a denial of request for a grant for redevelopment, housing authorities simply take large actions to achieve a high level of vacancy to justify demolition without the proper approval from HUD. Refusing to lease vacant units, despite a long waiting list, at least seems to constitute a potential violation of HUD laws such as Code 42 USC 1437P Section D, as well as potential civil rights violations of discriminatory impact depending on who constitutes the waiting list being denied the opportunity to lease the vacant units. As an organization rooted in the principles of honesty over deception and exploitation, as well as contributing to the flourishing of others, instead of continuing hierarchical abuse and diminishment of the other, Initiatives of Change USA calls on Richmond City Council to hold RRHA accountable and to further discuss the concerns raised by Councilwoman Kim Gray in the October 28, 2019 City Council work session concerning the RRHA's rising number of evictions and the potential connection to the Navy Hill development proposal. On May 20th, 2019, a convening took place of the Faith-Rooted Revolution, a multi-faith and multi-issue organizational coalition to discuss the power in coming together to recognize and disrupt historic patterns of oppression as they emerge in our current time. One of the concerns raised during the time was the potential impact the Navy Hill Coliseum project would have on the public housing that surround the proposed project. We heard similar concerns raised at a community meeting in December of 2018. It's important to note that in their written response to the Navy Hill Independent Commission, the administration and the Navy Hill developers stated a portion of the RRHA Creighton Court public housing development site is also within 1/2 mile of the Navy Hill development site and may also be impacted by the new investments. The acts of the Richmond Redevelopment Housing Authority and its CEO, Damon Duncan, in evicting and displacing families while refusing to lease vacant units in Creighton to new tenants have done more than just potentially unlawfully violate Section 5 of the annual contributions contract. The methods of how they have conducted these evictions have eroded the trust of those they are supposed to assist. From limiting public access to their September 18th board meeting around their 5-year plan to removing those offering legal support to Creighton residents at the October 30th meeting in Creighton Court, RRHA's actions continue historic legacies of displacement against some of the most vulnerable in our city. Just because something is current doesn't mean that something is new. Eduardo Galeano once said, "History never really says goodbye. History says, see you later." In the 1950s, this same Richmond Housing Authority destroyed 4,700 units of housing in black neighborhoods and only replaced them with 1,736 units of public housing. The city of Richmond and RRHA must not repeat the harms of the past of actors such as consultants Harlan Bartholomew or R. Stewart Royer and Associates, whose path towards redevelopment was paved over black people and their neighborhoods. Moreover, the city of Richmond certainly must not perpetuate historical harms while simultaneously claiming to honor the black heritage and neighborhood called Navy Hill. Navy Hill itself was destroyed in the name of urban renewal to clear the land for the current Richmond Coliseum. As a peace-building and trust-building organization, we take a stand against all harmful legacies of violence. Coretta Scott King once stated, "I must remind you that starving a child is violence. Neglecting school children is violence. Punishing a mother and her family is violence. Discrimination against a working man is violence. Ghetto housing is violence. Ignoring medical need is violence. And contempt for poverty is violence." It is our great leaders of the movement toward liberation for black people that remind us that any project or 5-year plan presenting itself as redevelopment that leads to displacement rooted in contempt and criminalization of people in poverty is nothing but violence. James Baldwin in 1963 said that local governments involved in urban renewal were actually complicit in a process of violence whose impact truly meant and became, as he termed, Negro removal. The acts of Damon Duncan and RRHA in evicting and displacing families from Creighton Court while refusing to lease vacant units to new tenants are not just potentially unlawful violations, they are also acts of violence. Mayor Stoney and Superintendent Cambrus recently held a beautiful program encouraging RPS children at Martin Luther King Middle School to stop the violence. The leadership of the city of Richmond cannot invoke Dr. King to give a moral standard to the children. If adults and leaders rebuke the moral standards of Coretta Scott King by committing the very acts of violence she defined and taught to Dr. King. On what moral authority can a city tell children to stop the violence when it actively enacts violence against that same child's family through policies of displacement? As an organization committed to ensuring the lessons of history are not forgotten by our institutions or our communities, we ask that you join us in writing your Richmond City Council member to demand that the RRHA stop the violence and increasing eviction rates. We demand more accountability and oversight into RRHA's growing evictions and their ceasing to lease vacant units in Creighton Court since June, as the FOIA request revealed. The issues raised in the October 28, 2019 City Council work session around the actions of RRHA must be addressed and also considered within the context of the Navy Hill development proposal. Attorney Brian Stevenson says, "We have a legal system that treats you better if you are rich and guilty than if you are poor and innocent." The city is currently considering, through the Navy Hill development proposal, paying over hundreds of millions of dollars in partnership with Tom Farrell and Dominion that has overcharged over $379 million from everyday Virginians and overage charges from just the years 27 to 2018. Yet the RRHA is evicting families, some only $87 short on rent, just for the crime of being unable to afford rent, all in the name of redevelopment and a pathway to more affordable housing. One of the core values of the faith-rooted revolution is that we all have agency and the power to decide whether we simply continue the oppressive legacies we have inherited or whether we choose to disrupt those legacies of oppression with streams of justice, as many faiths are encouraged to do. As the Quran instructs its followers, O you who have believed, be persistently standing firm in justice, witnesses for Allah, even if it be against yourselves or parents and relatives, whether one is rich or poor. On behalf of the Faith-Rooted Revolution, we call for RRHA to stop the violence and for Richmond City Council to investigate and hold RRHA accountable for their recent activity concerning not leasing vacant units in Creighton Court while increasing evictions. We leave you with the words of the prophet Isaiah, later uttered by Jesus to his followers at the beginning of his ministry. The Spirit of the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor, to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor, to comfort all who mourn and provide for those who grieve, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. They will rebuild the ancient ruins and restore the places long devastated. They will renew the ruined cities that have been devastated for generations. May those trapped in the dehumanizing cycle of poverty be blessed, and may those who contribute to keeping people in that cycle be transformed into vessels of peace and justice. Redevelopment that becomes bad news to people in poverty is not the work of justice. It is the work and extension of a legacy of displacement that we are all called to disrupt. In greater understanding and solidarity, Initiatives of Change United States. I also invite you to join us for a rally November 12th at 4:30 at City Hall, right before the City Council meeting on November 12th, to demand more oversight and accountability over the potentially unlawful evictions that RRHA has been taking place in that were brought to our attention through the FOIA request. We thank the community advocate who came forward, and we also stand in solidarity with those who are actively being displaced, and we call for the governing bodies, such as Richmond City Council and all of Richmond, to provide accountability and oversight and to stop the violence. Thank you for listening. Alan Charles Chipman.